It's Cardboard Time, episode number 99, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, I have reviews of Kuiperium, My Village, and an interview with Isaac Hirschfeld. I do have a little bit of a statement on current events. I'm not going to do it at the start of the show. You can listen to it if you're interested after my interview with Isaac. That is completely up to you. I'm just leaving it to the end in case people want to tune out. But I do want to say something. So, episode 99, we are one away from 100. And on that back end, I will be talking about my guest for episode 100. So you're going to have to listen to me rant if you do want to hear what's coming up in episode 100. But anyways, let's talk about that shelf of aspiration. It is down to 121. We are dangerously close to 120. And it was funny because we had a board game day with our friends Jordan and Bernie, and we got the puppies acquainted. So Charlie and their dog Crash got acquainted. We played some games, and Jordan said, "Oh yeah, we'll get you down to 100 by the end of the year." And I'm like, "Sir, PAX Unplugged is coming up. I don't think you understand what's going to happen there, but it is what it is. Let's see what we can do. 110 would be amazing if we could do that, but I'll even take 120. Like, I would be very, very happy with that at this point. So let's talk about the acquisitions. 2 games came in from crowdfunding, the first being Conquest Princess, which I have already played, of course. You can listen to my review on a previous podcast of Conquest Princess. I'm looking forward to getting that out at some point and playing the finalized version with all the goodies in there. Also from Maj, this was one from Road to Infamy that I was looking forward to quite a bit. And I did actually get that played. I have played it solo. I did really enjoy it. I love the mechanics on it, and I will have more thoughts on that very soon. That is one that I want to touch on, probably episode 101. Episode 100 is going to be a long one, so I'll probably make that episode 101 if there's time. As far as review copies go, I did get in a review copy of Pizza Rolls. Now, I did post about this on social media. This was a game that I had originally played at a game design conference I attended earlier this year in Cincinnati, and really enjoyed. And the designer got a hold of me and asked if I wanted a review copy, which I said absolutely, I do. So I am looking forward to playing that more, and I will be talking about that on a later episode, probably closer to the date that it is going to crowdfunding. I also purchased Rebel Princess. I was in Columbus, Ohio, after driving down to Cincinnati to look at wedding dresses, and drove back up through Columbus, bought myself a wedding dress. I'm excited for people to see, but you're going to have to wait a little bit. But yeah, and I had to wait for Allie. She was looking for hers, and I decided to go over to the game store, as you do when you're waiting for your fiance to get done with her appointment when you can't see the dress. And I did pick up Rebel Princess, so very happy about that. And also somehow I missed out on counting Murray the A-hole frog. So that also was technically an acquisition, I guess. I thought I counted that, but apparently I didn't. Because when I went to go put it into my BG stats to go and play it, it wasn't there. So I did get to play the game, and I will be talking about that once I play a couple more games. This one I'm probably going to take to PAX with me. I feel like it's a very good PAX game, very good convention game, plays 3 to 6. So looking forward to playing more of that. I did get to play Rebel Princess. Very fun game, kind of a take on Hearts with a little bit of a twist. Nice little trick-taking game, and had a lot of fun with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the other cards that are adding the little twist to the rounds bring as well. Marabunta I played. This is a 2-player roll and write with area control and I slice you choose mechanics. Very interesting. I do want to play a little bit more of that. It's not going to be one that maybe necessarily lands on my frequent played shelf, but I do want to play some more of it. It was very thinky. It was very interesting. And it was a Reiner Knizia game. My Village, I did get to play, and we will be talking about that on this episode. I already talked about Fromage, and then Tower of Madness, I played right around Halloween. It was very appropriate, and we did get that out to the table. So lots of activity on that shelf, and we are currently trending down. So let's keep that going until we get to PAX, and then, it's going to be a thing. But as far as reviews go, let's get into the 2 that I have for you today. The first being Kuiperium, released in 2024. It is for 2 players, 30 to 90 minutes, designed by Steve Cassell, Matt Cousineau. The art is by Elias Stern and Alexander Vasiliev, and published by Dragon Egg Games. Now, Kuiperium is a 2-player sci-fi themed game where you'll take the role of a corporation building a space station along the Kuiper asteroid belt with the goal of mining Kuiperium. Kuiperium is a newly discovered element and is incredibly valuable. Race against your opponent to gain control of the space station, mine the most Kuiperium, and ultimately launch towards new frontiers. Earth has sent 2 corporations into space with the goal of mining and researching this new resource, while constructing a self-sustaining space station as our last vestige of salvation. And it wouldn't surprise me. Publicly, these 2 corporations are working together, but behind the scenes, each is trying to unlock the secrets of Kuiperium to take control of the space station and ultimately humanity itself. In Kuiperium, you'll be playing cards in your tableau, gaining abilities and rewards, but be careful. Every card that you play has a worker placement location that only your opponent can use. Place workers, gain rewards, and climb the discovery track. So basically, in this game, the first player to the end of that discovery track is the winner. So thanks a lot to Matt Cousineau for the review copy. This was one that when I was at Gen Con meeting with Dragon Egg Games and Isaac, who you'll hear later in this episode, this was one that I definitely was interested in. And there's a lot of elements to this. There's a little bit of push your luck. There's a little bit of tableau building, some worker placement, some take that, some resource and hand management. Everything kind of comes together in one package. But I really think that the core fun of this game and what really attracted me to it, and you've heard me talk about it on at least one prior episode, and I think I did actually do a little bit of a talk on this on the review video that I did from Gen Con. The core fun of this is the action cards that you're playing down. You're going to give your opponent worker placement spaces, so you get an action, but now your opponent has a place to put their workers. So you're placing these action cards down, getting stuff, and you're trying to build up your tableau so that ultimately you can jettison these cards in order to move up this track to win the game. I think that this is a very, very interesting and pretty robust mechanic because you actively, when you place your workers, you don't get the benefits of your worker placement spaces until you take those workers off. Because you are trying to jettison cards to get these points to move down this track, you might not be able to place all three of your workers and make it like the most efficient action to pull those workers back. So your opponent can start getting rid of these cards and moving down the track, and then you're just kind of out of luck if that happens. And I really like that because the interplay there is really interesting. It's very fascinating. And what do I do? Do I play cards? Do I put, my pieces on worker placement spaces? Do I, just take one of the workers back and get that reward and not try to put all three of my workers out? So a lot of interesting choices and very interesting strategies. I really enjoyed that. There's definitely some take that, which again, I'm not the world's biggest fan of. But this kind of felt like that middle of the road compromise between feeling mean and necessary. It doesn't feel targeted. You're only playing against your opponent. So, there's that where people aren't ganging up on each other. You're just going back and forth. I didn't hate it. So I think that, that is kind of high praise from me. If I don't hate your take that mechanics, that's doing a pretty good job. I think that this did often feel like you were forgoing an opportunity to advance your own board if you were going to destroy something of an opponent's. So that was also very good. I did feel like some of the cards got to be a little bit repetitive towards the end. I do get that you kind of want the, kind of same actions so that you don't have to explain a bunch of stuff to players. But it did get a little bit of repetitive towards the end of the game anyways. And, some of the strategy cards, depending on the game state, could definitely provide a huge advantage. These were one-time plays that you played it. Once you had the ability to, you chose between three of them, and then you played that down and you got this, massive ability. And then some of them are definitely better than the others, depending on the game state. So if you had a bad draw for your initial three, it might not net you much of an advantage to play them once you reach the point that you can actively go down and play that strategy card, where your opponent might get something that suits the situation perfectly. So there is that did feel a little bit flat for us. As far as the art, I thought that the art was very solid for space-themed art. It does the job just fine. I would say maybe even a little bit more above average than your average space game. So really good job with that. The rulebook also did seem to do a pretty good job of making the game relatively easy to teach. This was a very quick run through, look at everything, lay everything out, and everything just kind of made sense. I didn't have a huge amount of questions. There were a couple of clarifications that I needed, and I was able to refer back to the rulebook or in certain edge cases off to BGG, and they were clarified on there. So I think that from a rules perspective and a rules teach, it is very easy to get up and running, especially if you have familiarity with hobby games. You're going to dive right into this with the concept of worker placement and then pulling those workers off to get some actions. From a color vision perspective, really good double coding on the edges of the cards. I thought that was really well done. The player pieces are different shapes, so I did appreciate that as well. So overall, I thought that this did a very good job from a color vision perspective. As far as my final thoughts go, the core mechanics of the game are great. I would love to see some more takes on this and that on some of the concepts that are introduced here, especially with the interplay of the cards and the worker placement spaces. I think that mechanic is really fascinating and really, really interesting. I don't know if you could do something with a personal board that you're doing this with more than just the two players heads up. I would like to see, some variation of this used, maybe in conjunction with some other mechanics. I thought that this was really, really cool, and a really neat idea. I'm interested to get this to the table more, and see how it stands up to repeated plays with different opponents. But it'll be staying around. It'll be circulating around the friend group for a while. It is one that I am trying to actively get a few different opinions on, and get some more people to know about it. So, one that's passing around a little bit. But if you're into two-player heads-up games that offer something a bit different, you like that worker placement aspect, you like that tableau building, with that worker placement caveat where you have to be very smart about what you put out there, this one could be for you. It does offer something a little bit different, and I would recommend it staying in the collection. That's Kuiperium. And the second game that I wanted to talk about today was My Village, and this was from 2015. From 2 to 4 players, 60 to 90 minutes. Designed by Inka and Marcus Brand. The art is by Dennis Lohausen and published by Eggert Spiele. A new chapter opens in the Village Chronicles. In this standalone game, each player is in charge of their very own village, controlling its entire fate. Known places and characters can join with new mechanisms to make up a gaming experience that feels so familiar, and yet is so different from Village. Village enthusiasts will recognize some core elements, for example, the lifetime track and the Village Chronicle, yet the new dice mechanism gives a whole new twist and dynamic to taking actions. My Village is of similar game weight as Village. So this one I bought on sale from Cool Stuff Inc. during my heavy acquisition period of really cheap games. I think this one was like $7.50 or something like that. And it was kind of at a time that Cool Stuff Inc. had a sale. You just bought whatever. It's like, oh yeah, this is on clearance. I'm going to get it and play it at some point, right? When I acquire it in 2016, and then close to 8 years later, decide to finally get it out to the table. But yeah, that's how this came into the collection. I do have Village. I have not played Village, so I don't have a comparison to that. So for those of you who are interested in the comparison between the two, can't quite do that yet. But this was my first foray into the Village universe, I guess. And I do have kind of a few complaints about this. This is a game from 2015. So I think our expectations for games are a little bit different now. The setup on this is an absolute nightmare. Multiple decks that need to be shuffled, set out, sorted, that kind of thing. I will say that the large table presence did make it a little bit clunky trying to figure out exactly how you're going to set everything up. It does wind up being quite a table hog where you need space for not only your main player board and all the cards that go around that, but you're going to be taking those cards that are around that main player board and putting them next to your player board and building out your tableau. And it is a lot. So you need to have a really big table, or else you are going to be kind of manipulating things so that everything will fit on the same table. I will say that the turn structure was very straightforward. You draft 2 dice, and you're either going to perform a black banner action, which is once per turn. That's like buying things, that's certain actions on your player board. That's certain actions that you might get, from some of your cards. Or they have white banner actions, which is usually after you buy one of the cards. It's going to get you some sort of resource. It's going to move you on a track, etc. And you can actually take all of the white banner actions of that specific number that you draft the 2 dice from, and you execute that. So if you have 3 or 4 different white banners with all the same number, you get to execute all those things, which is very satisfying. For those of you who are familiar with my top games of all time, Space Base is one of them. I really love that mechanic. So that was a big plus for me. It definitely helped this game's case. I will also say the rules about what you could and couldn't do when villagers were present was also a bit nebulous and confusing. You had to refer back to the rulebook multiple times. Certain cards you could buy and bring into your hand, but you couldn't fulfill them for points. Certain ones you couldn't even, add resources to or turn over. Certain ones you couldn't use the abilities. Certain ones you could. You could get the points off of them, but you couldn't. It was just very. There didn't seem to be a huge logical reasoning for that rule that you could make a general blanket statement about. This is when you have a villager here, you can do all these things. When you don't have a villager there, you can't do these things. So that was definitely confusing and something that, again, I think it's kind of evident from the time period. There was a bit of, questions as far as that goes. I think the interesting thing for me about this game, other than the engine building, was that everything costs time. Every time you spent a certain amount of time, you had to get rid of a villager, so you have a track that's going around. As soon as you cross the bridge with that track marker, the Grim Reaper goes and takes one of your villagers away. That does take away an ability that you had until you replace it, which I really liked. Although it was punishing, it did cause a lot of tough choices. You had to think and plan ahead about, okay, this person's going to be going away, so I need to do this before they go away, so I can get these points, but I don't need the villager there after that. I also really did like the engine building aspect. As I said before, I did feel that it moved maybe a little bit too slow for my tastes. It didn't quite move fast enough. It didn't pick up as much as I was hoping for. The gendered language, again, 2015. I keep coming to that, but the gendered language in the rulebook was really bad. It always defaulted to his anytime I saw something. Again, it's a rulebook from 2015, but still something to point out for those people who don't like gendered rule books. It is something that is going to bother you, because I did see it over and over again, that it was just using one singular pronoun of his. From a color vision perspective, this was mostly not an issue. The player pieces themselves were absolutely fine. The one thing that I did see that was an issue was the size of the portraits of the different villagers. So you had a chronicle space once you got rid of your villagers. The first 2 that players got rid of was actually going to go into these chronicle spaces to get you points. Where those villagers kind of sat and matching them up between the player board and between the chronicle spaces, it was a little bit difficult. They were very small. If you could tell from color, you were fine, but I couldn't tell from color, so it did wind up being a little bit of an issue, but I was able to work around that, so just something to keep in mind. For my final thoughts, I did think that the dice drafting elements in this were very interesting, as well as the time management aspect of it, where you're slowly losing the ability to do certain things unless you replace your villagers. This game is punishing, which I liked a lot of times, as it made me make some tough choices, but often it did feel a little bit too punishing. I also have a lot of dice drafting games, and I don't think that this one would probably come to the table over something like a Castles of Burgundy. That is my gold standard when it comes to dice drafting and trying to figure out what to do with your dice and take actions. So I think it's a fine game. It's one that I wouldn't turn down a play of. When I talked to Jordan after our play, I think we kind of fell along the same lines of if somebody were to pull it out at a game night, we would play it. But I don't necessarily think that it needs a home in my collection, and therefore this one is leaving my shelves. So that is my village heading off the shelves, and definitely off the shelf of aspiration. So finally glad that I got to play this one after 8 years. So stay tuned because coming up next, we have an interview with Isaac Hirschfeld. On today's interview segment, we have Isaac Hirschfeld, founder of Montage End Games and designer of Arbor Falls. Isaac was also the event coordinator for Dragon Egg Games at Gen Con this year, where we met each other. So, Isaac has also played Monopoly so intensely, apparently, that he made an opponent's nose bleed. And we will be talking about this. I need to know the story. So, Isaac, welcome to Cardboard Time.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. First, I'm surprised you found that snippet fact off the internet, but I suppose it's the internet, so it's out there.
I'm a good researcher, I
I
think.
love, I
I
love
I
that.
like to think that
I
I
love
am.
that you found it. So I want to first clarify. I actually prefer indirect confrontation games. Most people would describe them as multiplayer solitaire. Terraforming Mars is my favorite game. That's generally what I like to do. But when I'm with my brothers, there's something about them that just pulls out this competitive spirit over me ever since we were kids. And there's always like collateral damage whenever we play. So we were hiking Mount Zealand here in New Hampshire, and there's a hut at the top of the mountain that you get to stay over. And we got up to the top of the mountain. We're all exhausted from this long hike, and they had board games in the hut. So the only one that they had was Monopoly that we would play. So we all were playing Monopoly, and particularly my brother's girlfriend at the time also came with us, and we were playing Monopoly up on this mountain after being exhausted. And there's this unofficial rule that we unfortunately do in Monopoly called corporations. So when somebody starts
Okay.
losing, we just consolidate our plan of attack against each other, and we just get to as cutthroat as possible and just do stupid deals, and just it slowly devolves into debauchery. And basically my brother's girlfriend got so frustrated and her face got so red, her nose just started bleeding, and she just like, I can't do this, and just ran away from the table. And that's when the three of us were like, okay, yeah, I think we went too far.
Yep. That's it for Monopoly
Yeah,
tonight,
that's it.
which unofficially turned into a game of Ankh for some
Yep.
reason,
Yeah.
apparently.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got
Okay.
really bad. Um,
For the hundreds of weird like little house rules that I see in Monopoly all
it's
the
terrible.
time, that one is new to me.
Yeah, corporations. Don't try it. It's
Corporations.
very dangerous.
Okay. The more that I find out about Monopoly, the more that I'm like, okay, you just need to play this as vanilla
Oh
as
yeah,
possible to the letter of the rule.
definitely.
That's why they're there.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
nobody's nose is gonna bleed otherwise.
I will say my brothers are the only people I play Monopoly with, and I
I can
probably
see that.
shouldn't, because it's like I said, collateral damage always happens.
I mean, it's family. They have to be there for you at the end of the day. It's not like your friends who, it's like, hey, I have to be nice to these people. Your family, it's you get a little bit more leniency, so you can do stuff like that.
Yeah, it was also family wise. Growing up, we always had a competitive way of doing our chores and such. For example, you know, our mother wanted us, the three of us, to fold and put away the laundry. Instead of us equally spreading out the laundry, we would do a group rock, paper, scissors. And the person that lost had to do all of the chores. So there was sometimes there was
Oh,
chores where times where I didn't have to do chores for a whole week. But there was also times where I'd have to do chores for like 2 weeks straight, and they didn't do anything because I kept losing the rock paper scissors battle. That's
The family dynamic.
it's I love them. I love them.
Awesome. Well, so we got a little bit of your history in gaming, but can you tell us how you got started in the hobby in general?
Yeah, so when I got into meats and bones of the hobby, it was right a little bit after college for me. I was dabbling in tabletop RPGs with some friends that introduced me to it. And one day we were just walking through a city, and there was a game shop that we always walked by because we weren't hobby gamists. And one of my friends just said, "Hey, we've always talked about going here. We're finally going to go in here. Let's just do it." We go in, we get overwhelmed by the huge options, and he sees a box that says Dungeons and Dragons on it, and it said Lords of Waterdeep. And this was probably the year or two after it first came out, and we already knew it was really popular. And we're like, sure, why not? Let's try it. And I really hadn't played hobby board games at this point. I pull out the rules. It's like 20 pages, which is really not bad. But to someone that's never seen that before, my friends were like, I don't know if I want to do this. But as I'm reading it out loud to them, I'm like, oh man, mind just blew with the possibilities that is the hobby games. And then I've been in
Mhm.
debt from buying games ever since.
I think we all have.
Yeah. So Lords of Waterdeep, and then over the last couple years, actually, I wanted my hobby to be more constructive. So I've been working on designing my own games, but also have done some game design, game development, social media management, and demoed for several of my peers. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that aspect in a little bit. But first, I want you to tell us a little bit more about Arbor Falls, which is a game that you did design and you're publishing it now, right?
Yeah. So caveat with that is no, I'm no longer self-publishing that.
Yeah,
That being said, it is going to be published by a publisher. It did get signed, and I don't have permission to give full details on that yet. But as soon
gotcha.
as that does happen, I'll be broadcasting that, obviously. So I'm excited. The project is going to happen, just not unfortunately fully by myself. Well, or fortunately, because I'm really excited to work with these people when I can talk about it more, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, anyways, Arbor Falls. So the story is during the pandemic, my wife and I played a bunch of board games together because we were in isolation. But we also played a ton of Animal Crossing. And there was this weird pressure during the pandemic for everyone to learn new skills and or
Hmm.
develop new hobbies or whatever. So I
Podcasting.
podcasting, right? Right. I did dangerously think about that for a second.
Good thing you didn't
I
get into it.
yeah.
I heard the people that got into it weren't big fans of it. So,
Yeah, they're getting near their
anyways,
100th episode, right?
yeah, who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Yeah, so what I was saying was we knew eventually we're gonna have to see people again. So why don't I just try and combine those experiences, board games and Animal Crossing? So I'm like, well, I'll just make a board game that's about Animal Crossing. It can't be that hard, right? Joke's on me. It's been 4 years in development. Um, but the idea here was to was to make a competitive yet friendly group experience that felt like Animal Crossing, and my game really came to its own identity and from a gameplay and world building standpoint, but the mood's the same, and that's what I was trying to do there. You move to a quiet town, and your busy neighbors ask you to complete favors for them, and as you help the community grow, you fill your house with some quirky furniture sets, and it's been a really awesome journey, like learning to become a game designer over the past few years. Yeah.
I mean, I think that that's a pretty cool skill to develop during the pandemic and to nurture. I mean, there were people that bake bread, which is a good skill.
Yeah,
Game design, I think, is a fantastic skill.
thanks. Yeah, it covers a lot more hats than I realized. Especially because I was aiming towards self-publishing, so I needed to learn a lot about that, how to talk to manufacturers, and coordinate with graphic designers and artists, and trying to do that groundwork, social media engagement, and organic marketing sort of thing. So I've been learning all that because by profession have nothing to do with any of these. So
And we are also going to talk about
yeah.
that in a little bit as well. So, one of the other skills that you have is the fact that I met you in the capacity of the event coordinator for Dragon Egg
Hmm.
Games at Gen Con. Could you tell me a little bit more about them?
Yeah, so Dragon Age Games is, a small, very small independent publisher with a very unique model. They've only published a few of their own games, but mostly they co-publish with new publishers and designers and kind of share the burdens of establishing a project based on their needs, such as do they need more development work, manufacturing, logistics, or marketing, sort of thing. For example, Whitewater Castle Games, they made Kuiperium, and Dragon Age Games helped them, organize with manufacturers, understand what the distribution looks like, made connections with other people in the industry for them. So they became a kind of a co-publishing together. And now Whitewater Castle, with the success of Kyperium, is they're not working on their own game, their next game by themselves, sort of thing. And this is kind of true of all the other co-publishers. Is it's almost like a co-op where a group of people are learning and growing off of each other, sharing tips and tricks until they're ready to go out on their own.
And I think that that's a really cool model because there's a lot of people in the industry that don't really know how to navigate all of those waters. And it's a lot to take up on your own. So, for a first time designer getting their feet wet, it's really cool that somebody like Dragon Egg exists. Like, I hadn't heard of them until you reached out, and I'm very glad that I have now because I've directed a couple of friends their way as well that are working on some of
Hmm.
their designs. So,
Yeah, and Max is such one of the co-owners is such a nice guy, and he even admits he's still learning and growing himself, and that's partially why I event coordinated for him at Gen Con. Is the story goes is I told him, like, Max, your catalog has 6 or 7 games out now. You should look at into doing conventions, and because a lot of people want to see your face out there, and that helps a lot. And he's like, well, sure, I have no idea how to do it. You want to do it? I don't know how to do that yet. And you then figure it out and then teach me what you did. So I did. I learned how to
yeah.
do everything, and I taught it back to Max, and he probably could do it himself now.
Well, that's really cool. And one of the things with conventions is that space is
Mm.
money. The booth space at a convention is very pricey. It is your main cost when you're going in and running this booth. Other than logistics and that, and bringing stuff in and trying to manage that. But what was the process like designing the booth and then trying to balance between being inviting while still showing off as much as possible? Because I think you struck a very good balance with the limited space that you had, with still showcasing a good amount of product without having it feel super cramped.
I appreciate you saying that because that was probably the most challenging part of the convention for us. We have 7 games, and they're all by different designers. So I wanted to give each person the equal opportunity to be able to show off their game at the booth. So trying to figure this out was really hard. We actually, even halfway through the show, decided our setup wasn't optimal, and then just changed it for the rest of the convention just halfway through a day. And actually, the second setup was even better. So the key is trying to balance between having as many open avenues for people to get into your space while still having enticing game setups or decorations near the front to just catch their attention. That's always the most important point of any design for a booth, is to get people to stop walking. That's that's the first thing you need to be able to do. So no matter what your setup is, if you don't have anything that's a little bit in their face, they're just going to keep walking. So what we ended up doing the most was having 2 4 by 2 foot tables with the short end pointing out to the front of the booth. So, and then we had the game set up on them. So as people were walking by, the game setup was right there, right at the edge of the booth, and they could look down at it, and then hopefully using like leading lines concept, look deeper into the booth as they follow their eyes follow up the table. And then in between the 2 tables was this nice open avenue where they could come in into this open space. And then there's a nice display of other things in the back of the booth for them to look at, the big, beautiful artwork, the giant banner in the back, having seven games on on a big banner always helps because it makes it seem way more legitimate to have all of these things into a catalog. So really something right in their face that leads them towards looking towards this impressive, this is legitimate company, and there's an open space in the back that if I can want to explore more, I can go into it.
Yeah, and one of the big things that I felt in some of the booths at Gen Con was it was way too cramped.
Mm.
Like everything was just in the front. Everybody was trying to shove as much in the front as possible and, trying to bring everything up there. And I think that that's what was really unique, and you did mention it in inviting people in and having more in the back because you can showcase more. You can have more that's back there that you can talk about, and you can have more of those conversations for people that are interested, where you're talking about more games and you're saying, hey, we also have this and we
Hmm.
also have this, and this isn't on display, but you might like this. So I think that it was a really well designed booth from that aspect. So
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've learned a little bit of what I'm saying from people I've worked demoed for previously. I demoed for Good Games Publishing. Kim Brevock, the the head of event coordinating and other hats in Good Games, taught me a little bit of this working with him. So tips off to him for helping me like think about this more. But I agree with you. There was two booths on the ones on either side of us. Both had their full setup right at the front of the booth, and I think that's a little bit of a trap. You can grab a lot of attention that way initially to they initially stop and look, but you have the whole flow. Gen Con is this massive flow of people and they're
yep.
constantly moving, and anytime you stop and you're still in the aisle, you can feel that pressure even if they're not directly touching you. You can feel the flow of the people around you. So if the demoer doesn't immediately get you interested to hear more, you're going to get swept away again. So having that initial thing right up front to make them stop, but then having that option for them to get out of the flow, I think is really important too. And then one other small detail that I think really helped is sometimes having like a little decoration right up front. We had to
Mm.
one of the designers of Kuiperium, their father, hand carved this one of the characters in the game, this little cute robot, and it had these little blue lights in his eyes and little boosters that glowed. And tons of people, I ended up putting it right up front, and tons of people just stopped and looked at it and gave me an opportunity, like, "Hey, you want to hear about the game this guy's from?" And then they could come into the booth after that. So that's also important.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that I got video of that. That was in my latest Gen Con wrap up. So it definitely made an impression with me.
Yeah, he ended up being right up the front of the booth. I think he was in the back when you came over, but
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So, do you have any more tips for anybody that is looking to run a booth at a convention?
I actually have quite a few, so stop me if I'm start rambling here. But the first one that I want to say right off the bat is go to conventions. Even if you're just going, for yourself for pleasure, but more so as a company, even a new company, go to conventions. You may not make money off of cons, and that's the first thing you need to realize, but despite that, the game industry, especially for small companies, is so much word of mouth. You know, your friend saw a game, they recommend it to you, which somebody else then recommended to somebody else. So having your presence at a con really legitimizes your presence in the industry, and but more importantly, it is so much fun. It is one of my favorite things about this industry is you're surrounded by people that want to have fun, and you're there to give them the fun. So it's the easiest sales job ever because everyone wants the games. And then showing off your games to people in real life will really motivate you to keep going because you'll see all the joy that you're bringing to them, and it will help you keep moving forward with your projects and building your company more. So, first off, go to conventions, even if it's just the small local ones. It makes a huge difference to see the joy on some random person's face that you give when they play your game. So that's the first one. The second one I think is really plan as much as you can and know the costs beforehand. Especially for Gen Con, it was a huge undertaking to understand that every step of the way there is a cost. For example, getting your inventory shipped there costs money. Having your inventory put at your booth costs money. Having the inventory taken away from your booth and then having the inventory shipped back to your warehouse all costs money. And you got to find how to reduce that or how ways to go around that. And if you don't anticipate those costs, then you can't figure out how to reduce those costs. For example, for us, most of our games were actually brought to the convention by the co-publishers, so we didn't actually have to ship any directly, which caused other issues, but that's a different story. But it was a good way of trying to figure out how to reduce costs. The other thing is trying to figure out how many games that you're going to bring to a convention, which is kind of hard to do. But I'm going to throw down some quick maths that I did, and it's a crazy how almost accurate I was. So hold on, I got the numbers written down here somewhere. All right, so
Okay.
I wanted a max demo time of 20 minutes. Because I did that, I was able to figure out how many demos I was going to do throughout the whole convention because it was 4 days. So we had a maximum demo opportunity prevention opportunities of 342 demos between the three tables we had. So that was the max we could sell at like I don't want to bring any more inventory than that because I doubt I'm going to get 100%. And none of us have sales experience, so I'm like, yeah, we'll just do a goal of 20% sales, and that comes out to 68 games that we'd sell. And at the end of the convention, we sold somewhere above 70. So it wasn't far off, and that also trickled into sales online afterwards and stuff. But immediately, that really kind of helped us figure out how much inventory to come. So planning and doing the even quick math really helps a lot. Yeah. So, oh yeah, and then also on that point, there's big conventions, there's small conventions. So everything I'm talked about right there is based upon Gen Con. We have this constant traffic flow. So you may not go to a small convention, you're not going to have a constant traffic flow like that. So expect to plan very differently for that. At a big convention, we were just doing 20-minute demos because we wanted to get people in and get people out. While at a small convention, you'll probably be sitting down and doing full playthroughs with people. That kind of brings me to my next point that one of the biggest issues I see at the big conventions from new designers and new publishers is they try and oversell their game. And it kind of really can turn people off or bore them. I literally saw people yawning from somebody that was talking to them too long, which was like such a sign that like you need to stop talking to them and let them go. Definitely be, con goers are on the move. They're trying to do as much as possible, especially at Gen Con. There's so much stuff there. They're on the move. So you do have to be a little assertive to grab their attention at first. So that does feel rude, but you want to engage them, but give them the opportunity to walk away if they don't want it. So, first off, like, hey, do you like 1v1 games? If they catch their attention, great. You bought yourself a 30-second speech with them. If they're still then agreeable to listen to you, pull them into the booth and do a full pitch. But if they don't want to hear that, don't waste their time, don't waste your time. Let them go. And then the next thing, once you get them to the booth, don't spend more than 15, 20 minutes with them. Unless they really particularly want to have a full demo, learn all the rules, give it to them. But for the most part, you want to show them thematically what your game's about. You want to show them what you're trying to accomplish and an overview of how to accomplish it. And then finish it by showing them something really cool that you can do, maybe a big combo in your game. You want them to want more. So if you explain every single detail of your game, you're just going to be talking about like a really long lecture to them. They may lose their interest. You want them to be thinking about the possibilities of your game. You want to introduce them to the narrative so they can explore it. You want them to ask questions because it tells you they're thinking about it. If you answer every detail, you take the mystery away, they'll know everything about it. They're done. They fully analyze whether they want your game or not. But if you can get them to think like, "Ooh, what about this possibility?" You can really draw them in. An example is like the end of a good season of a TV show. They leave you on a cliffhanger. It's something really exciting, but you want to watch the next season. That's kind of like the sweet spot you want. So I find a lot of people kind of overdo it and just explain the whole game for like an hour and a half, and they don't want that. And I want to finish with this: is be genuine and passionate. People pick up on that when you're talking to them at the convention. If you're not into it, if you're not showing how much you poured your effort into this game, they're gonna feel that. And obviously, you're making a sales pitch, you're promoting your work to them, but show that you love games and know that the people you're showing to also love games. So that's how you align with them. And if you're not that kind of person that can really entertain a con goer, because that's kind of what you're doing, you're doing a show for them, you're entertaining them. Yeah, that's what you're doing. If you're not that type of person, hire somebody or have a friend to do it for you. I actually been hired by several of my peers to go to cons for them just because I'm not as shy and I'm okay being silly and assertive for them. One of my friends has an upcoming game called Twisted Trumpets, and I dressed up in a full like a Renaissance trumpeter herald costume, and I just blew a horn to get people's attention and hopped around. And it's because it's something he wanted, but he doesn't feel that. So just be energetic, but genuine. Don't fake it. Yeah, I thought,
All pieces of very, very good advice, Isaac. So thank you for that. I think the last one especially resonates with me. I think you have to be genuine. I think people absolutely pick up
yeah,
on that, especially at a convention. Like, they see so many people and they can just detect, oh yeah, this person's not into
yeah.
it. They don't care. Yeah, so I think that that's definitely something that I wanted to highlight as well. So other than Arbor Falls, do you have anything else that's upcoming that you're working on?
I mean, I'm always kind of working on designs in the background between my normal job and life. Nothing is ready for publishing quite yet. I have one that I've pitched to a few companies and got some small interest, but I'm not going to talk about that quite yet. But a brand new design that I started working on very recently that I'm actually really excited about. I'm working title calling the Meeps. So it's based on the video game The Sims, where you play as a
Mhm.
person trying to learn new skills and new hobbies. And the aim is to be like a light medium game where you have slightly different mechanisms for each of the hobbies that you're trying to learn. So like the aim is to be a less heavy version of Endless Winter, like that kind of
Okay.
concept where you do different things in different areas and they all coordinate towards your greater goals of becoming a great meep or sim sort of thing.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I really like the concepts of taking kind of heavy, complex, super crunchy, and making it more accessible, especially thematically, but also mechanically, just so everyone can have fun. Something that can interest the lighter weights and the heavier weights together.
And I think that's a sweet spot when it comes to gaming for us. We like a game that can kind of distill some of those heavier mechanics down to a little bit lighter weight so that more people can get to the table.
Yeah, and that's mostly what I play anyways, and that's actually mostly what I enjoy, even if I play heavier games. I'm also working on two other projects for peers. I'm very heavily involved with this game called Hairband by Dickie Champin. He has a couple of
Mhm.
games published already. It's a Hairband is a dice placement game about 80s glam metal. Fans of the genre of music will appreciate the kind of general debauchery of it. It's very silly and over the top, and that will be coming to Kickstarter quarter 1 next year. And then also, I am working on an expansion for a friend's game called Twisted Trumpets, which I mentioned recently. It's a tile laying game about constructing a whimsical and twisted trumpet based upon the king's peculiar tastes. I've been helped play test that game since literally the first play test that he ever did, and immediately wanted to be involved with it because it's silly fun. And the base game will be released probably sometime next summer by Play to Z Games. And after that release, we'll see if the expansion that I'm working on for it will be wanted.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, some exciting stuff coming up in your gaming career, but you did mention your day job. Did you want to enlighten the audience as to what you do during the day?
Sure. I'm a registered nurse. I worked in acute care in a hospital for 8 years, taking care of people across the age spectrum, as young as 6 weeks to as old as 100, and she was 107. After that, during the pandemic, I actually moved over to urgent care. The need was there during the pandemic, so I did a little bit more emergent medicine for a little bit. But now I'm actually working and treating students at a university health clinic here in New Hampshire. Along with that, I do a lot of health promotion events on campus, and that kind of my current job is what really gave me the courage to start event coordinating, because I'm always on campus promoting health and and medical practices and how to take care of themselves holistically, sort of thing. And I'm always having so much fun interacting with the students, so that kind of really pushed me into that direction. But in general, I really love nursing because it combines two of my favorite things: is kind of scientific problem solving and helping people. And some ways the board game industry kind of hits that flavor for me too. Just the impact is different.
And I think, you talked about event coordinating, you brought that into the board game industry, your problem solving skills from usually playing games. That's one of the things that I like in playing games is having this puzzle put in front of me. And I think that that can translate well as well.
Yeah.
So, do you have any hobbies other than gaming?
For a little bit, I was actually really deep in cosplay. I made a cosplay of Beetle from Zelda Breath of the Wild. I don't know if you're familiar with that character,
Hmm.
but he has this giant five backpack on his back shaped like a beetle, and I made a 5 foot beetle backpack on my back, and there's a
Oh,
little
wow.
awning that came over me, and all these like hanging bags of apples and stuff hanging off of me. And I kind of just, one of my friends wanted me to cosplay with him because he wanted support, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just do something. And I spent like a month making that, and I didn't think it would become much of it. But when I got into the convention hall wearing that, people lost their minds. So it went to my head a little bit. So I started going pretty deep into cosplay. I also worked a lot with EVA foam, which is like a kind of a cosplay material, and I made a cosplay of HK-47 from Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, which is a much
Hmm.
more niche reference for a lot of people, but that was a lot more technical for me to learn, and I got some professional shots done of that. So that was a lot of fun. Did that for a while, and then also I kind of like composing music and beats, but that's really more for my own stress relief. It's not something I want to publish.
Okay. Very, very cool. So I see a stack of board games behind you.
Hmm.
So apparently you play outside of designing. Some designers that I talk to don't play board games outside of their own designs, which is kind of wild to me. But what is on your table currently?
So this is a pretty hypey one that a lot of people are playing, but right now I am in love with Adranma's Edge. I got Dwellings of Eldervale from the first print run, and it's been in my top 5 games ever since. So this was one of the most highly anticipated games for me for a long time. I really like the game. It does feel a little nuanced at times, but I love the how the hybrid mechanisms really blend together to make like a very coherent experience, especially with the clashing of the two major styles of board games being blended into one. Just top shelf stuff.
Very
On a lighter standpoint, I actually been really enjoying Flutter by Phase Shift Games.
okay.
It's a tile laying game about playing pollinator tiles to collect pollen. And what I like about it is the shapes of the tiles are really unusual. They're triangular based rather than most games are hexagonal based. And
Hmm.
the whole point of the game is the corners of the triangle tiles have symbols on them that you need to match up with the ones other. And it really the shapes are just very unconventional. So it's fun.
Oh, very cool. I haven't heard of that one. I might have to check that out. That sounds up my alley.
Yeah.
Just something a little bit different.
But
Very cool.
familiar, but just enough edge of something different that just I captured my imagination.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So, how can people get a hold of you on socials?
So if you want to get a hold of me on an official capacity, you can email me at contact@montageendgames.com. But I also have a Montage Endgames Instagram and Facebook page. I also have a Arbor Falls Facebook group that hopefully to put the big announcement in there soon. So feel free to reach out to me through any of those channels. if you have any questions, you want some advice on any of the things I said, and just want to talk about games, I'm down for that as well.
And I think that's one of the things that, we were talking about before the show actually started. We were talking about the industry and how we help each other out, and, just that, teamwork that we
Yeah.
have, I think is really cool. So it's much appreciated when you can help somebody and you can reach out and people will actually respond, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, everything I learned wasn't in isolation. It was from a thousand hands of helping people. And one other little piece of advice I'd like to end with, if you don't mind, is
Yeah, absolutely.
so the whole one of the whole reasons why I call myself Montage Endgames is sometimes you need a montage to get to the place you want to be. All right.
There you go.
So the only way to level up is to gain experience. So if there's something out there like you want to become a game designer, you want to start a podcast about board games, you only get there if you try.
Yep. Nope. And that's really been the story, I think, of both of us, is trying different
Yeah.
stuff and meeting people and interacting with people and doing these little small steps to get you where you want to be.
Yeah.
So I am looking forward to this Harbor Falls announcement. When it comes out, I'm very looking forward to that. My fiance spent a lot of time with Animal Crossing,
Hmm.
so she is going to be super hyped about that. So
If
hopefully this is something that can get her into that. Well, Isaac, thank you so much for the advice for everybody and for being on the show today, and go follow Isaac on his socials.
It's an honor. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so if you are a listener that is here just for the board games, you don't want any talk about personal life or anything else, you can tune out now. You probably know the end of the show bumper by heart, anyways. You'll just have to wait on my episode 100 guest. I will be posting teasers about them when the time is right. I'm not saying the person's gender at all, as that would be a spoiler. So, but if you do listen to the show, to kind of find out about marginalized communities and hear my experiences in the industry. I think by now we all know the results of the election. If you're a member of any marginalized community at this point, you've probably had to do some extensive processing. How am I going to move on from this? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? With trans people specifically, we're looking at, how am I going to secure access to HRT? Am I going to have the ability to use my documents? What's going to happen with a number of different things? So there's a lot that we've had to process. There's a lot that people who don't go through this or don't have a kid that's going through this don't necessarily know about. And it's been a very difficult week to try to process this. But the bottom line is that answer is going to be different for everyone. I've had friends who have already moved away from the United States at this point because of what has gone on. And it's very unfortunate. To me, as far as what that means to me, I'm staying. I'm working to try to help my community as much as possible around here. And I have to hope that we're going to work through this somehow. I don't know how, but I think one of the things that we need to do is to tell queer stories, to tell our stories. And it's going to be very important going forward. We need to be heard. People need to know what we're going through, what we're experiencing, because I don't know if people truly understand what could potentially happen. If you want to help, if you're looking for a way to help, if you're an ally that is not in this fight, that does want to help going forward, I would recommend that you find a community group that's working on protecting people. Anything that you do is going to help us tremendously. And I can help point you in the direction of resources if that's something that you really need. Y'all know how to get a hold of me, but I'll tell you at the end of this anyways, as I always do. So I do look back and I remember that there's been many more people from marginalized communities that have been through far worse in the past. And that's us as well. I look at Marsha P. Johnson, for example, and looking at what she went through, and it was just it's just not good. And people started off without rights that I've enjoyed my entire life. And, every connection that we make, every heart to heart conversation, every time somebody hears our stories, it has helped us move forward. Even if the majority of Americans kind of have forgotten those conversations and only thinking of themselves in this election. So that brings me to next episode. And next episode is episode 100. It will be featuring Amabel Holland. Amabel is a unapologetically queer, unafraid to be herself, and a storyteller at heart too. And I really can't think of a better episode to put forth at a time like this than someone that's in the industry just looking to live her life authentically like I am, and without wavering one iota. She is just unapologetically herself, and it's a beautiful thing to see. It's a great conversation. We did meet up in Toledo, and we had a great time at a coffee shop called Grinders up there, and I'm so excited for people to hear about this. I wish it was under different circumstances, but y'all are getting this when you get it. So that is my episode 100 guest. In addition, in upcoming episodes, I'm going to be raising up more women, BIPOC people, AAPI people, Hispanic, LGBTQ plus people, and other marginalized voices that need to be heard. I think that more than ever, it's going to be very important. I am possibly, we're looking at it, but I'm potentially doing a live show at OrcaCon with some very special guests as well that do fall into that community. So hopefully I'll be able to bring that to you as well. Some people that I have looked up to and have been doing some great work in the industry. So regardless, I will be here in 2 weeks for you, just like the 2 weeks after that, and the 2 weeks after that, as long as I can. Now, your job is to listen, take whatever inspiration you can from these conversations, and speak up for us when you can. You need to elevate our voices however you can, because the bottom line is we are going to need it in the months to come. So, until then, if you want to know more about Cardboard Time, see, that's where it is. If you want to know more about Cardboard Time, you can go to the website at cardboardtime.com. The Instagram is at cardboard_time. Blue Sky is at Cardboard Time. And we don't go to Twitter anymore. We never go to Twitter. Nobody goes over there anymore. The Discord is on the Tabletop Express server. You can always email me for an invite at cardboardtime@gmail.com, or you can go on the website and there's a link right on there. It's very convenient. And the community is very good over on the Tabletop Express. Couple weeks I'm going to be hanging out with those guys and looking forward to it quite a bit. We'll probably be having a meetup, but more details on that to come in the coming weeks. But speaking of the coming weeks, thank you so much for listening. I'm excited to bring you episode 100, and I'm hoping that y'all are going to like it. I'm looking forward to the next 100 that I get to do, that I get to bring to you, that I get to have conversations with everybody about. And I'm just very grateful to be a part of this community and to bring these stories to you. So Until then, in 2 weeks, when we listen to episode 100 of Cardboard Time, I've been Arwen Kathke.